Kinship, patronage, and bribery in the Old Testament. To begin with, let's consider a scenario. You're in an Asian country, but you've lost your parking ticket. You find the security guard. He says that the fine is $200. But if you give him just $50, he'll open the barrier gate for you to drive out. Now, what will you do? Choose your answer in the Zoom poll below. This evening, we'll be considering three connected subjects prevalent both in the Old Testament and in Asia today. The first is kinship, on which the focus will be three factors contributing to its importance in the Old Testament. The second is the institution of patronage, which is embedded in kinship, or I could say kinship is the soil in which patronage springs. Now, the word patronage is not found in the Old Testament, but the concept is. However, we will see that we need to be careful in applying sociological models of patronage to Old Testament texts. The third subject we'll be considering is corruption, in particular bribery. Now, this is a popular topic in research and the media. We will mainly focus on the issue of bribery, considering why it is common in many patronage cultures, trying to untangle the Old Testament teaching about bribery, and finally differentiating between a gift and a bribe. Now, just so that you know that this seminar for tonight is based on a chapter I wrote for a forthcoming edited book called Exploring the Old Testament in Asia. So this is just one chapter in that book, and it'll be coming out published by Langham. So to the first subject, which is kinship. The central social institution in the ancient Near East was kinship, as it is generally in Asia today. The family, a small kinship unit, is found in all societies. So the study of the family is an important part of any attempt to understand a culture. Individual Israelites were members of various kinship groups, each of which entailed various roles and responsibilities. Now, the example of Saul displays the full complement of kinship groups, as we can see on the next slide. An individual in ancient Israel was part of a father's house, a clan, a tribe, and then a nation. So, for example, Saul, the son of Kish, was part of a father's house of Abiel. His clan was a Matrite clan, and his tribe was the tribe of Benjamin. And then the biggest kinship group that he belonged to was the people of Israel. Now, the first two kinship groups held the greatest social and economic significance for those living in ancient Israel. The smallest kinship group was called the father's house. It comprised all those living within the household of a male ancestor and would include his wife, his sons and their wives, and their sons and wives and unmarried daughters. Now, the father's house refers to blood relations, while the household includes Israelites and non-Israelites, such as servants and resident aliens, along with the household possessions. The next kinship group up was the clan, a group of related households named after one of Jacob's grandsons. Now, a village would consist of clans sharing the same natural resources. It was a protective association of families with social, economic, judicial, and military obligations. Now, the next kinship grouping was the tribe, named after the sons of Jacob. The main significance was territorial landholding, although it also functioned to defend against foreigners or other Israelite groupings, for example in Judges. And then the largest kinship group included all the tribes, described as all of Israel, and has similarities to the modern notion or understanding of a nation. Now, the central importance of family in ancient Israelite culture derives from three key components. First, family was based on the core values of honor and shame, which relate to a person's social standing within a community. Honor is publicly acknowledged worth, while shame is a claim to worth that is publicly denied. Honor is primarily a group value, whereby an individual shares in the group's honor. Kinship groups inherit honor from honorable ancestors, which is maintained and defended in the current generation. Like most of Asia today, ancient Near Eastern culture was collectivist, in which the social standing and well-being of the group, rather than the individual, was of the greatest importance. The second component is tradition. Children should honor their parents because it is commanded, Exodus, Deuteronomy, and because they gave them life, and they pass on time-tested communal wisdom that carries on the faith and forms the basis of their culture. So a circle of societal formation is established. Tradition informs family structure. Family structure perpetuates tradition. For instance, respect and authority for judges, kings and priests and prophets derives from respect and authority for parents. Tradition remains a key component in most Asian cultures today. The third component is land. God was the landowner who gave the land to Israel as an inheritance. The land provides the framework in which honor, shame, and tradition are all knitted together, and where the people experience the covenant relationship with God. Control and maintenance of land, family inheritance, and national borders were matters of honor, shame, and tradition. As in most of Asia today, the family was the most important kinship unit in ancient Israel. Israel's theological understanding of the family is found in its narratives about fathers' houses, also found in depictions of God in metaphors of social roles drawn from the family, also found in laws and instructions that shape and direct behavior within the family, and also found in theological reflection in divine references in law, moral instructions, and prophecies. The family held a central place in Old Testament theology and ethics. Indeed, it was one of the two major social institutions that shaped theological reflection and discourse, and the formation of its theological traditions. The other major social institution being the monarchy. So we just thought about the importance of family in the Old Testament. So I want you to write now in the Zoom chat, how does the centrality of family in the Old Testament compare with your own situation? So you can write your answer in the Zoom chat. So to the second connected subject, patronage. Patronage and benefaction were embedded within kinship, taking on the form of fictive kinship. This explains the kinship terminology often used to refer to non-kinship relationships. Kinship was the overarching social structure, with the values of honor and shame informing the interaction of families and individuals, and the institution of patronage and benefaction embedded within kinship and informed by honor and shame. Patronage and benefaction worked with the values of honor and shame, for without the importance attached to accruing honor, patronage and benefaction would not have existed in the form or to the extent that it did. The term patronage is not found in the Old Testament. In Roman history, a patroness was an aristocrat who had loyal followers called clientes. Nonetheless, anthropologists have identified patron-client relations as a widespread phenomenon in the ancient world and contemporary society. Since the 1960s, interest in patronage and patron-client relations expanded from anthropology to other social sciences, including political science, economics, and sociology. A basic definition of patronage is a reciprocal relationship between unequals. And 5 basic characteristics of patronage: non-kin based, that is, the two parties who form the relationship were not family. Fictive kinship, although they're not family, they might refer to each other as, for example, father and son. Unequal social status, one is going to be higher than the other one. Unequal social exchange. So as you can see here in this picture, the patron might give things such as protection or money or access to certain resources to the client. The client will give things such as loyalty, thanks, and allegiance, but it's unequal. And the agreement, the patronage relationship, is informal. There's no contract, there's no oath usually involved. So let's think about an Old Testament example for a minute. How well do you think the relationship between Boaz and Ruth, especially in Ruth chapter 2, how well do you think this relationship fits the criteria of patronage that we have here? So I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about that, and feel free once again to write your answers in the Zoom chat. Some scholars view covenant as a form of patronage, but Zeba Crook argues, and I think rightly, that covenant and patronage are different forms of asymmetrical exchange. The formal, legally binding elements of covenant exchange are lacking in patronage, as we mentioned above, the 5th characteristic of patron-client relations. Now, with the caveat that the categories are fluid, family and patronal exchange overlap, as do gift exchange and patronage. Crook presents the following model, as we have on the slide. So we have here family exchange, which is kinship based. It's egalitarian, and it's got this open-ended sort of reciprocity and a selfless sort of giving. So, you know, when we're in a family, if we see a family member in need, we do whatever it takes or give whatever we need to help out our family member. So examples: exchanges within households, or even between households in the same clan, and between clans in tribes. Just by the way, I think in the book of Ruth, we see how Boaz functions as a Kinsmen Redeemer. And the Kinsmen Redeemer functions within a clan. So the Kinsmen Redeemer redeems another clan's person who's in need. Maybe they've sold property, or maybe they've sold themselves into slavery, and the Kinsman Redeemer buys back either the person or the property that's been lost. Now, interestingly, in the book of Ruth, it seems to go beyond what's prescribed in the law. So we have, you know, as I said before, we have redeeming people from slavery and redeeming property, but there's no mention of the need to marry, which is what we see Boaz doing in the book of Ruth. But anyway, we can talk about that another time. So the second form that Crook mentions is symmetrical exchange, which is non-kinship based. Here we have balanced social status and exchange, balanced value of exchange. So examples: gift exchange, loan and loan repayment, buying and selling, and trading. Third category is asymmetrical exchange, third form of exchange. This is also non-kinship based, but here we have unequal social status, unequal social exchange, so repayment not in kind. So we saw in the previous slide that with the patron and client, the patron might give, for example, protection, but the client gives back things like honor and gratitude. It's not in kind. So some examples might be of patronage. Some examples are patronage, such as teacher, student, patron, client. Another example is benefaction, imperial benefactions. And the third example, as you see here, covenant exchange. So he's got here treaties and oaths, and you see that Cook has got patronage as a separate category of to covenant exchange, a different category or different type of asymmetrical exchange. Finally, we also have negative exchange, also non-kin based. Social status is not relevant. It's treatment of enemies, opponents, and strangers. Some examples are bartering, cheating, and stealing. Patronage is common in Asia, where society is characterized by mutually reciprocal links, reinforced by family connections. These relationships require the regular exchange of gifts and favors, and while patronage is a neutral institution, it can encourage biased decision-making among officials. For example, in Thailand, Chow Pho, or godfathers, use their informal networks to obtain government permissions and freedom from harassment, or to sway the election results. When patronage is protected by the state, monarchy, military, and judiciary, and sanctioned by tradition, it can prove difficult to curtail, as we will now discuss. So to our third interconnected subject, corruption. Corruption can be defined as dishonest or fraudulent conduct by those in power, typically involving bribery, or simply as the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. It is found in all countries, including Asia, including Australia, where I live, and has recently gained attention as a key issue accounting for poor economic growth and underdevelopment. Now, I will outline this issue from a macro perspective of politics and economics first, then focus on one type of corruption, bribery. Since bribery is a major and systemic issue in most of Asia, I will establish the Old Testament teaching of bribery and then consider one particularly thorny practical issue, how to differentiate between a gift and a bribe. There are three main intersecting causes of corruption. First, incentives. Low salaries, monopoly power, discretion, lack of accountability. 2. Institutions. Political structure, legal structure, rule of law, and culture. Third cause, personal ethics. Now, the macro factor we will focus on is governance regimes, which falls under the second category. Our definition of corruption rests on the presumption that it is wrong to use public office for private gain. Yet societies today characterized by a collectivistic, not individualistic culture do not necessarily value a distinction between public and private. Relational connections are used to personalize transactions with the state and a multitude of particular transactions occurring daily. In such a context, the head of state and high-level government officials can institute policy in favor of interest groups in exchange for benefits. That is, they act as patrons, with rulers treating the state as their patrimony. Based on the prevalence of collectivistic cultures in Asia, characterized by strong kinship bonds, patronage, and gift exchange, it is not surprising that bribery is also pervasive in Asia. But as Bishop Hua Yung has noted, the line between a gift and a bribe is not always easy to draw. One definition of a bribe is to dishonestly persuade someone to act in one's favor by a gift or other inducement. Scholars often perceive an ambivalence in the Old Testament teaching on bribery and gift giving. In the Old Testament, there are two main terms for bribe, shokad and matan. We'll come back to those in a minute. Some others also include kofer, which also means cover over or ransom. Nasa panim, lift up the face or to show partiality. And oshek, more generally meaning oppression or extortion. Although the noun shokad has two meanings in the lexica, gift and bribe, its 23 occurrences in all major sections of the Old Testament overwhelmingly mean the latter, that is, bribe. While bribery might have been treated ambivalently in the ancient Near East, Old Testament law clearly prohibits and condemns it, such as this one here. You shall not pervert justice, you shall not show partiality, and you shall not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and subverts the cause of the righteous. In narrative texts, bribes pervert justice, 1 Samuel 8, and in a military context, the present is not a disinterested gift. It is actually given to prompt military intervention in 1 Kings 15 and 2 Kings 16. Prophetic texts denounce bribery. Isaiah 1, Isaiah 5, Ezekiel, Micah 3, for example. So Isaiah 5, woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine, and valiant men in mixing strong drink, who acquit the guilty for a bribe, and deprive the innocent of his right. So bribery is viewed negatively also in Psalms and wisdom texts such as Psalm 15, 26, Job 15 and Proverbs 17. Now, if you just have a look at this next slide. So this is from Proverbs 17. What do you think about this? A bribe is like a magic stone in the eyes of the one who gives it. Wherever he turns, he prospers. Now, this verse seems to view bribery positively, this proverb. But the crucial phrase is, in the eyes of the one who gives it. Because in Proverbs, as Bruce Waltke notes, in the eyes of denotes a full state of self-delusion, in which case a bribe here is seen negatively. Now the second Hebrew term, Matan, let me just get it up here. Now the second Hebrew term holds a broader range of meaning than shokad. Generally, Matan is morally neutral, denoting gifts with or without expectation of reciprocation. So we see gifts with the expectation of reciprocation in Genesis 34, and without, for example, in Genesis 25, Ezekiel 46, and Esther 9. Theologically speaking, God gives humankind gifts, Psalm 68, and we give God gifts or offerings, Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 23, Numbers 18, Ezekiel 20. However, a negative connotation can be attached to the word based on the motivation behind the Matan, and we'll talk about this now. So as we said, Matan is used for both a gift and a bribe, and are distinguished according to the context and the motivation. So if a gift is given with the expectation of profit or gain, they are bribes, and thus to be rejected. As it says in Proverbs 15, whoever is greedy for unjust gain troubles his own household, but he who hates bribes will live. See, it's in parallel, greedy for unjust gain, bringing trouble, and that's parallel with bribes. Well, the use of Matan in the next proverb is interesting because it seems it's used in a positive way. Have a look at this. A gift in secret averts anger, and a concealed bribe strong wrath. It sounds like it's good, right? Averting anger and averting strong wrath. But I would argue that the problem is that it's given in secret and it's concealed, and that in itself can bring problems, as we'll soon see. In short, while there is some lexical ambiguity, the overall biblical witness on bribery is clearly negative. Most scholars agree that variance bribes, that is, bribes given to pervert the course of justice, are condemned in the Old Testament. But not all scholars agree that transactional bribes are condemned, where transactional bribes are given to facilitate a process and are also known as grease money. But have a look at this proverb. A man's gift, Matan, makes room for him and brings him before the great. Now, what does this sound like to you? What type of bribe possibly might it be? Well, it almost sounds to me like a transactional bribe if it gains the giver access into the presence of the great. If that's the case, then transactional bribes are also to be denounced. So why is bribery denounced? The main reason bribery is denounced is because of the character of God. He hates bribery and does not show partiality based on a person's gift or place in society. Deuteronomy 10. He's not partial and he takes no bribes. God gives gifts, and our gifts or offerings to him, unlike in other religions, should not spring from a desire to manipulate him. Bribery is also denounced because it perverts the course of justice, Proverbs 17:23. It has a destructive effect on wider society, 1 Samuel 8. It favors those who can pay, the rich, and it is counterproductive, as we saw in Proverbs 15. It brings trouble on a household. Thus, the Old Testament stance on bribery is unambiguous. Yet more needs to be said about the difference between a gift and a bribe. Now, this is what John Noonan writes, and see if you agree. And as you listen to his quote, think about whether you agree or not, and then you can write your thoughts in the Zoom chat. So a bribe expresses self-interest, he says. A gift conveys love. A bribe subordinates the recipient to the donor. A gift identifies the donor with the recipient. A gift brings no shame. A bribe must be secret. A gift may be disclosed. A bribe must be concealed. The size of a gift is irrelevant. The size of a bribe, decisive. A gift does not oblige. A bribe coerces. So what do you think? Do you agree with these differences between a gift and a bribe? I'll give you a couple of minutes now. Just write your thoughts in the Zoom chat and then we'll discuss these together. Okay, getting some thoughts down here. That's good. Everybody's agreeing. Agree. Very well expressed. It is true. Totally agree. Gifts is a form of bribe, somebody writes. Okay, everybody seems to be agreeing. Anyone have any thoughts that are different to John Noonan? Okay, somebody's written here, sometimes bribes are not concealed or secretive. Yes, that can be true, but most of the time it's on the secret side. Maybe because the giver of the bribe doesn't want everybody to know what they're doing. Bit simplistic, the size of gift does matter. In a sense, right? Because if you're going to bribe someone, you can't give them 50 cents. You need to give them 50,000 or something like that, or even more or less. But not 50 cents. Motive is the same. I'm not sure about that. We'll think about that in a second. Sometimes gifts are expected. That is true as well. The amount, yes, that's right. Big enough to attract favor for the bribe. Depends on the motive behind the gift. Okay. Okay, sometimes in Malaysia, the size of a gift can influence the size of the gift that is given in return at a later date. I think that's true. I think that's true as well. That's true. So even with red packets, we like to know how much are given, and then we try to give this something similar back. Sometimes people want to get a favor. Yes, we'll have to think about that. Yes. Sometimes people want to get a favor and give gifts. It could be a bribe in a certain sense. To think about that later on. Yep. Gift has no expectation of return. Interesting. Does the gift have an expectation of return? I think it might depend on the culture. Is there such a thing as a disinterested gift in Asian cultures? Okay, in Western culture, definitely that's the ideal, right? A disinterested gift, a gift with no strings attached. But I'm not so sure that's the case when I was living in Malaysia, and also when I relate to my more Asian cultural friends here in Australia. Oh wow, lots of thoughts here. That's great. Okay. Okay, self-invention. Okay, yep. So someone's it depends on the motivation. Yep. Okay, good. Okay, good. All right. So some great ideas here and some great thoughts coming out. In Asian culture, exchange of gift is common. That is true. Gift in kind. Yep. Appreciation. Yep. Okay, good. All right, let's continue.
John Barclay, in his book Paul and the Gift, challenges Noonan's notion that a gift does not oblige. Barclay instead argues that gifts create social ties of family, friendship, patronage. Those ties were understood as the obligation to receive and return a gift, at least with gratitude, and often in some kind of counter-gift, whether material or social. Social being, for example, honoring the giver or giving thanks, gratitude. The obligation was not legal. One could not take a beneficiary to court for not returning a gift, but it was social and moral. The idea of anonymous gifts or gifts with no strings attached is a modern Western notion, not shared in antiquity or most non-Western cultures today. So when we arrived in Australia, we wanted to make friends with our neighbours. So what we did at Christmas time was we cooked biscuits and we went around to our neighbours and gave them a gift of some biscuits. It's interesting to see the different responses of our neighbours. The more Western neighbours, the ones who'd been in Australia for a long time, for decades, they said thank you very much and received the gift. But there was no reciprocation in terms of a return gift or physical gift. But the Asian neighbours, so we have one from China living next door, we have somebody from India further down the street. Both of them reciprocated with another physical gift, either a chocolate or another lolly. So it's interesting to see. And as I'll mention soon, this understanding of reciprocation of gifts has implications for how we understand God's gift of His Son to us and how we respond to God's gift. So on to Mark Hamilton. His 2020 article echoes some of Noonan's ideas that we saw in the previous slide and also adds specificity. In an exchange of goods and services, Hamilton argues, the parties agreed to prices generally, but not always, without personal feeling or the desire for a long-term relationship. In some instances of market exchange, there might be a secondary desire for long-term relationship. In the ancient Near East, social relationships shaped at least some market forces, and vice versa. In a non-market gift exchange, there is a desire for longer lasting relationship. The bribe, however, is a third category. It is not based on a fair exchange of goods or services, and it does not aim to build a long-term relationship. And herein lies the problem. A bribe neither allows for the limits of economic exchange, nor leads to a friendship inviting ongoing reciprocity. Rather, Hamilton argues, it creates ill will, violence, and social disruption to produce some gain for the exchange participants. Hamilton argues that an important part of the Old Testament's aversion to bribes is that such a gift crosses the boundary delineating gift exchange from other sorts of commodity transfer. Now, central to the problem, he says, is the hiding of information, that is, secrecy. In an exchange of goods and services, knowledge by outside parties may be limited. In a licit gift exchange, the parties have full knowledge of the gift value because they must negotiate the reciprocal relationship that the gift creates and symbolizes. With a bribe, however, relevant knowledge remains obscured to concerned parties. Sometimes, paradoxically, the bribe is hidden while everybody knows it has taken place. Thus, bribery is neither an economic transaction nor a proper gift exchange. As Hamilton states, it is an illicit act at the boundary of the two. End quote. It disrupts social relations and shields or fosters violence. The reciprocity it invokes harms both parties without establishing a stable relationship of trust. Ultimately, it exposes the participants' lack of confidence in the system to reach a just solution to their problems, calling into question the concept of justice and/or the moral integrity of the keepers of the justice system. We can apply these ideas to Asian contexts where gift giving and reciprocity are part and parcel of the culture, pun intended. That is not to say, however, that Asian societies are incapable of discerning between a gift and a bribe. Malaysian sociologist Syed Hussein Alatas denies such cultural relativism and argues that leaders violating norms throughout history knew those local norms existed. Cultural practices, he says, are used for the purpose of corruption rather than being the cause of corruption. The problem of gift giving in patronage cultures, transgressing the boundary to corruption and bribery, still plagues more developed Asian countries. South Korea has a strong gift-giving culture, with 3 of the last 4 South Korean presidents implicated in corruption. But countries such as Singapore and Hong Kong share similarities with gift-giving, but they have managed to reduce corruption and bribery, although it has taken many years. Certainly, in a collectivist dominant culture, the relational ties and the expectation of reciprocal gift-giving create more situations in which to transgress the gift exchange boundary, along with a more intense temptation to do so based on a sense of obligation. Now, this has been noted in many Asian countries, such as Indonesia, Cambodia, and the Philippines. In the last country, the Philippines, the concept of utang na loob, that is debt of gratitude, is morally neutral, but it can be used in bribery, extortion, and nepotism. And certainly, the Old Testament reflects some lexical ambiguity between a gift and a bribe. Yet, we must remember that the Old Testament was written in a collectivist dominant culture to a collectivist dominant audience, similar to Asian cultures today. Gift giving and reciprocity is an inherent and legitimate part of social interactions, but it can be corrupted into bribery. The Old Testament unambiguously denounces bribery. It is clear about what is an acceptable gift and in what circumstances and with which motivations it is not acceptable. There is no biblical basis to argue that a gift and a bribe are indistinguishable. Indeed, the Old Testament can only prohibit bribery on the basis that people can distinguish between a gift and a bribe. Now, the web of cultural values that impact on bribery will differ from one Asian country to the next. Nonetheless, there are at least two factors that can be taken into consideration when differentiating between a gift and a bribe. First, the motivation. If the gift is given to influence or manipulate the receiver so the giver receives preferential treatment, it is a bribe. After a bribe, there is no further sense of obligation. Second, the context. A bribe is given to secure preferential treatment. For example, to ensure a favourable verdict in a court case. Gifts given after favourable treatment are generally not considered bribes, for example, tips. And, as mentioned previously, bribes are given covertly. It is a secretive exchange without public disclosure. Although larger value gifts are normally used for bribery, often but not restricted to money, the gift value is not a decisive factor because any gift, no matter how small, can be used as a bribe. Now let me just mention a caveat. Because of the dynamic nature of relationships and its various cultural expressions, there will be some overlap between the three categories. The three categories being proper gift exchange, economic exchange, and a bribe. So for instance, in some Asian countries, a gift may be given to a service provider to establish or maintain a relationship with a hope of better future service. The three categories and two main factors that we have here can guide our decision making, but wisdom is required to apply these to specific situations. And perhaps we can discuss these later on.
So we'll conclude with some theological reflections and some implications for us as Christians. Theological reflection yields further differences between a gift and a bribe. A gift is consistent with God's character. A bribe is not. God gives based on His grace and mercy to establish a personal relationship, first with Israel and now with all people. He shows us favour by paying the ransom to set us free. Mark 10:45, 1 Timothy 2. God is consistent in showing His mercy to the undeserving, first to the Jew and now to all. Romans 9-11. God's gift is unconditioned, but not unconditional. Our response to God's gift of His Son is to reciprocate with faith and love and obedience. out of gratitude for what he's done for us. So we give God honor and praise. Indeed, we present our whole lives as living sacrifices to him. Romans 12 verse 1. God gave of himself to us because he knew we could not cover our sin, and although he knew that we could not fully repay him. And so, we too can give freely, knowing that since God has already given us his Son, he will give us all that we need. Romans chapter 8 verse 32. And if we trust in a just God who will right all wrongs, if not in this life, then certainly in the next, Romans 12:19. We need not try to pervert justice for our benefit. Okay, so if you need the references or you want to chase up some of the things I spoke about, you can have a look at the references I've got there. But I thought what we do is we'll go back to the poll question from previously, from the beginning, and I want to see if you guys have changed your responses or not. So let me see if I can redo this poll. Okay, it looks like less people have decided they'll pay him the 50. Okay, let me just let you guys answer first, then I'll show you guys what you had. Okay, so just comparing it from the first one, more people seem to pay the $200 fine and less the 50 and less bargaining with him. So it looks like more people are willing to pay the fine compared from the beginning. Okay. All right. Okay, so let me see what you guys have written here. All right. So somebody's written here, $200 sounds like extortion. I'll negotiate for 50 with a receipt. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's a good idea to get a receipt, isn't it? Because then that makes it official. And I would like to see evidence that that is the actual fine amount. And it's not that, and it's not $100 and the guard is pocketing 100. Okay. All right, let's have a look here. Okay. What questions have you guys got for me here? Oh, unfortunately, I can't see your faces. All right, now, for some of these things, you might need to help me if you can in the chat, because I guess you guys know the cultural context a bit better than me. But let me see what you guys have here. Does the act of Abigail in 1 Samuel 25 to David constitute a bribe? Let me just see what that is exactly. Is that when? What is that? 1 Samuel 25. She's trying to appease David when Nabal goes up to him. Oh, okay. So Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves of bread and 2 skins of wine. It seems to be for appeasement, right? Because it looks like Nabal did something unwise, which might have, in which case David might return anger against. And so maybe in that case, it could be for appeasement. What do you guys think? I mean, I don't know this. I haven't thought about this story in terms of bribe or gift. What did you guys have here? Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, to me, it looks like appeasement.
I'm wondering if it's with royal patronage, something to do with that. So they want to, like you were saying, appeasement. So they were trying to get into the good graces rather than to bribe. So it could be something of an informal practice.
Yep. So, yep, I think somebody's written something in the chat. So Rudy's written, the Bible considered her as wise, and David rewarded her for being wise and meeting the cultural expectations by marrying her. So, yeah. So in the Bible, it seems to be viewed in a positive light. So in which case, they're unlikely to be a bribe. Yeah, but I was thinking in terms of appeasement in that case. And I guess showing showing honor and due honor to the king, which is something the Nabal didn't do. Okay, what else is here?
So maybe we'll just tackle the one with the most likes. So this is from Si Leong. During Chinese New Year, Hari Raya or Diwali, hampers and other items are given to customers as gifts. So it is practiced quite openly in Asia. Some corporate organizations do not allow vendors from giving and employees from accepting such gifts. So the question is this considered a gift or a bribe?
Okay. Yeah, okay. So this is one of the things where you guys might need to help me with the cultural context. I guess in that case, if the giving of a gift, corporate organizations.
So what normally happens? So what normally happens is during festivals, right? If you are so we're talking about a supplier giving gifts to let's say a main contractor, right? And then it is given, I reckon, in expectation of getting into their good graces, receiving more business in the future, and
Yep.
so on, and to build relationship. So this is practiced openly in Asia. Actually, in Malaysia as well, it's practiced quite openly.
Yep.
So so I think the corporations or organizations that do not allow vendors from doing so tend to be Western organizations which view this as bribery. But for Chinese or Asian companies, this is expected, I reckon. Yeah, quite. So now, as a Christian, how do we view this? Should we view it as a gift or a bribe? And how should we handle it on a more personal basis, I reckon?
Oh, this is tricky, right? I mean, in a sense, the corporation is giving the gift to try and increase their business in the future, right? From you, your custom, in a sense. So yeah, I guess it's a conscience issue for you. What's happened? So I work as a doctor on Fridays, as a medical doctor on Fridays. Previously, the medical reps used to be able to give us gifts, you know, maybe worth up to $20, $50 even, but then the government stopped it. And I think it has made a difference on a personal level. So once the medical rep gave me a gift, what they do is they come into my door, they give the gifts, that's the first thing they do. And then I felt obliged to actually listen to what they say. And then once I started using their pen, and their pen had, you know, whatever their drug name was on it, it did increase my use of that, whether it was the best for the patient or not, I'm not sure. So yeah, so I think just thinking back on my own experience, I think it's been a good thing that I haven't been able to accept gifts from pharmaceutical companies, because that doesn't sway my prescription practices. I just choose whatever is best for the patient now. So that's what I'd say about that one. Yeah, it's a bit tricky, this whole gift and bribery thing, isn't it? Because when I first started lecturing at SDM, there was one case where I'd finished a course and one of the students wanted to give me some money as a love gift. And this is before I'd done any marking of the papers. So I was thinking, you know, should I accept it or not? You know, as a new person in the country. And so I asked the TE director whether I should or not. And she said, yeah, it's a love gift. But then after I took it, I was wondering, you know, was that a wise thing to do? Because, you know, is that actually going to color the way I view this person's papers, the way I mark and grade his papers? So that became an issue for me. And so, yeah, I've decided it's probably, even though that person might have had good intentions, maybe from my perspective, it might not have been a good thing, and to do that.
So the next question, this is from Alvin. So the distinction between gift and bribe is clear. But what about donation and investment? These are common terms people use to get away from bribery today. So what are your thoughts on this? So I reckon it's about giving gifts for now, but for a future sort of benefit.
So who would you give the gift to and call it or bribe to and call it a donation or investment?
So in the chat group, said political donations. So giving to a political party or person. And then I reckon if it's investment, it comes with providing financial assistance to someone who is up and coming, whether it's a businessman or a politician. So in hopes that in the future, should they succeed, that we would be in their good graces.
Oh, okay. Look, I haven't really looked too much into political donations, but even in Australia, I have questions about people who give a lot of money to political parties. And I've read in newspapers here, for example, that a lot of the resource companies will give a lot of money to whichever political party it will, give most advantage to what they want to do in terms of mining or whatever it might be. So I find it very questionable. I do wonder, I mean, if the donation is, publicly revealed, that might be a different thing. But yeah, I have serious questions about the political donations. Okay. Investments, that's slightly different, I guess. I mean, if you're talking about investing in a young up-and-coming sort of person, that's sort of different. And I guess if you're investing, you're expecting some sort of return from that as well. So it's not a pure gift. It's not really a bribe either, because the investment might go south, in which case you can't really ask for it back. But, I mean, when you give a gift, as we discussed before, there is often this sense of reciprocation or forming a relationship, and it can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing, as we discussed with in the chat as well.
Yeah. So building up on that response, right? I've actually been reading up in preparation for this, and I found that actually because there are certain cultures, you were sharing before how certain cultures have inherited the gift giving in their cultures, right? So I'm wondering if it complicates the relationship that we have with this patronage system. So, for example, in Chinese groups, right? Face and guanxi is very important, right? Where who you're related to, or even your dialect makes a difference, and in how people relate to you. So I'm wondering if this is already embedded in it, then how do we navigate through this patronage system, and how do we protect ourselves from corruption, I guess?
Oh, okay. So I didn't really understand much about the patronage system until I came to Malaysia. Because we came as missionaries, and so we're sort of dependent on the gifts of other people. That's basically how we survive. Ultimately, they're from God, but the gifts are given through people. So the first church that we attended, there's a very generous person there. He lent us his car, and he often used to take me out for lunch. And I used to think, what does he want back from me? There's not much I can give to him, like on a material sort of level. But, I mean, in terms of giving him honor and respect and gratitude, I think that's about all he wanted. But that was like a patronage relationship, and there's reciprocation there. And that did give him honor in a sense, because I could say to my friends, look, this guy, his name is whatever, and he's been so generous to me, and that gives him honor as well. So that's how I started to understand the whole patronage system. And so then I felt a bit better about borrowing his car without having to pay for it and that sort of thing. Yeah, then I started seeing it in different places as well within Malaysia. But that was my first introduction to it, in a sense.
Yeah. So here, this is not in the. This is from the chat. So Sui Seng Lee said, many public listed companies now have a no gift policy, as directors cannot be held liable for the corruption of the company. So they need to show that they have taken adequate measures to prevent corruption. Yeah. So I reckon that's good. That's a way to counter.
Yeah, that makes it easy for the employees as well, right? They just know that's it. There's no negotiation.
Yes,
in that
correct.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll handle one more question. It's 8:57 now, so maybe one more. From the Q&A, someone asks, in honor shame cultures, how are gifts differentiated from bribes? Since it can incur serious consequence. So yeah, so how do we differentiate the two?
Oh, okay. I think that's similar to what I was saying in the webinar, right? So gifts, I guess, are given in terms of the motivation and the situation to try to persuade the person to do something for your benefit, I guess, and often to the detriment maybe of another party, possibly to another party. So a gift, I mean, gift giving is quite common in honor-shame societies. So often we'll give gifts to establish relationships, like for example, as I was mentioning, when we arrived back to Australia, we gave gifts of biscuits or cookies to our neighbors. And so we're just trying to say hello, we're trying to form a relationship, and we're hoping that, there's going to build an ongoing sort of reciprocal relationship, but it not always the case. That's a hope, but if it doesn't happen, then that's the way it is. How are gifts differentiated from bribes? What's the second part? Since it can incur serious consequences.
Yeah, so I guess what Siu Hong is getting at is that giving or receiving bribes incurs serious consequences. So we need to learn to differentiate between the two. So I guess you did cover it in the webinar regarding the motivation and the context, right? Yeah, so I think that's the answer for that. That we need to be clear of the motivation behind, and also the context in which the gift is given.
Yeah, I guess for a bribe, you're trying to persuade the person receiving it to do something in your benefit, I guess. And a gift, I mean, gift in a sense is trying to develop a relationship, but sometimes it can be just almost like a free gift in a sense as well, where you're not expecting anything in return, no benefit for yourself as well. But in an honor-shame society, often you do develop a relationship through gift giving as well. So it's important to give gifts and to receive gifts and understand how that whole system works as well.
So I think that's all the questions we can tackle tonight. So we will have to end here. Thanks everyone for giving the questions, and we hope that the answers are satisfactory and has helped you to better understand the webinar. So once again, we want to give a big thank you to Dr. Peter Lau for tonight's webinar, and also a big thank you to everyone who has participated actively in the chat and also in asking questions for this evening. So before we end, can we get a few closing words from Dr. Peter Lau?
Oh, really? Closing words. Thanks, everybody. It's been nice to be interacting with you all, even though it's mainly on the chat and the Q&A. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest in this topic. And I pray that it will be helpful for you as you go in your life and ministry.
Thank you, Dr. Peter. All right. Thank you once again, everyone, for joining us. Have a great evening and good night.